To all our very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in this Men's Health Week, welcome to the launch of the State Government's WA Men's Health and Wellbeing Policy. I'm Russell Goodrick, one of the volunteer board members of Men's Health and Wellbeing WA. Men's Health and Wellbeing WA is the peak independent not-for-profit charity dedicated to representing and promoting the health and well-being of boys and men in Western Australia. For more than 20 years, we've raised awareness of the importance of issues impacting men and boys, advocating for change, and fill the role of a central body supporting the emergence of a new sector. MAWA's most recent major accomplishment has been to coordinate the advocacy that led to the WA State Government's decision to create this vital policy we see today. Many of you and your organisations participated in this consultation process, for which we are very grateful. MAWA has now been tasked by the Health Department to facilitate the rollout of the Men's Health Policy, starting with today's event and continuing with a series of events and workshops to engage with you, the community, committed to health and well-being of boys and men. On behalf of the Minister for Health, Roger Cook, the Health Department of Western Australia and Health Networks, our sincere gratitude to all of you, to all the high-profile entities that have taken time to be here today. There are numerous significant peak bodies: WACOS, WALGA, government departments, police, education, mental health, country health, major companies, businesses, unions, and sporting groups. And we'd like to acknowledge you all collectively for participating in this significant event. As part of Men's Health and Wellbeing WA, we hope that further strategies will come out of this event, and that in moving forward, we will all get this right for men, boys, and the community at large here in Western Australia. Well, today we have a short video from the Minister. We'll then be hearing from fellow board member Dean Dyer with an overview of the policy, followed by an audience discussion moderated by Miles Protter, and then a quick summation by our chairman. But first, for Welcome to Country, would you please acknowledge Sean Nana.
To be here to Welcome to Country for you. And as we know, the reason what we're here for has a very similar language within our movement when we do a Welcome to Country. And to get people to understand in some way what a Welcome to Country represents, I will reinforce that with what we see when we look at these wonderful men who I've been engaged with for not just 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10, 15, 12, I think I stopped counting. But there are people in here who are committed to something. They could have given up many, many days before. But this excitement and the thought of having people in the room to feel and to acknowledge what it is that they see is just so necessary. That they don't give up. And when I get an opportunity to be in their presence, I still feel that sense of that we're on the right path. And if we're on the right path, is that you guys are in the room now to build that relationship of understanding. What do men, what do boys, who, when you get them in the right space, that feeds straight to the women and the children that are around them, and the community, and life goes on. I know these guys over a long time. And I've seen how passionate, how humble they are. And to do a Welcome to Country for you is an opportunity to maintain that beautiful energy that they show every single day of life. There is no question that the room here is now filled with passionate people who have a drive, have a commitment. And I want you to feel their sense of urgency. If they are worried, then we should be worried too. There is a time that we can make a difference. And this is the moment. You know what? You may be taller, shorter, you might not be Aboriginal, you might be Chinese, Japanese, English, Scottish, doesn't matter. When our hearts beat in the same rhythm, it leads us straight to our soul, our spirit. And in spirit country, no better than the people who speak of this country are the people that have lived here for thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. And it was great honour that now there is a place for us to share this. We have you for just a fleeting moment. But let that energy, I hope, today go beyond just your thought, just your presence, beyond your heart. I hope it gets to a soul place where we know the magic begins. Wear your label proudly. But if it separates you from your people, then take it off and never, ever, ever, ever use it again. So, I'd like you to connect with the person next to you by locking arms or holding hands the best way you can. And that way then we show that we're not just seeing people, we're actually physically connected. We'll take that down to the next level. All right. When we tap the wood, everything that's in life has been absorbed by the tree. But whatever's in the ground, and as we breathe, it takes in our DNA. All our great-great-great-grannies are in here. When I say our, there is no separation. This planet has been around for billions of years, and for all of us, our great-grannies are here in this piece of wood. And their voice now is starting to move, and the serpent comes out from the river, the Derby Yerrigan. And he comes out and he goes, who's that fella there? Talking to with all these old mob, the kangaroo, the wallaby, the emu, all together as one. When we speak of one, we speak of all. So what I'd like you to do is take a nice deep breath in, hold it, 3, 2, 1, out. Warawira Buyakanan. Warawira Buyakanan. Bad spirit, go away. We don't need you right now. Morichurin dat yeni. Kroberdan. Yen yen yaku. Good spirit, come sit. Not in the air, but in our skin. Dat yeni. When you feel the goosebumps going over your body, hopefully transferring to the next person, getting you excited. They're there always. You're never alone. Wanji nija wajak nyunga buja. Wanji nija wajak murich yogas. Welcome, welcome. Murich is really good. Yogas are women. Murich Marman is our men. We're calling you inside you, dancing and celebrating right now. Say, come on, you guys. We're all in this together. Never forget where you come from. Never forget where you're going. And if we give as much as we have, then I believe that this world will be a better place. And I hope today, for our brothers at the back there, and any sister girls in the room, and my aunties and uncles, I hope that I followed in the footsteps of our grannies. I hope that when we follow in their footsteps, we leave another piece of energy for our children. And then they walk into this space, they say, wow, man, I'm a lucky boy. I really appreciate your time. To all the gods, I hope that they come and bless you. And if you feel goosebumps, not just for today, for the rest of your life, know that our people are so lucky to be a part of your day, and you're not. Thank you very much.
Now we have a short video from the Department of Health by the Minister for Health, Roger Cook.
It's my very great pleasure to introduce the WA Men's Health and Wellbeing Policy, designed to improve the health and wellbeing of all men and boys living in Western Australia. This is a much needed piece of work, which is the first of its kind in WA. This policy outlines clear goals and actions to help the health system and our partners deliver better service in areas where men are at greater risk. men continue to face poorer health outcomes than women on almost all key health and wellbeing indicators. In WA, men are overrepresented in areas such as suicide, cancer, type 2 diabetes, heart and lung disease, and stroke. More than 77% of WA males are overweight or obese, and more than 14% smoke. More than 31% exceed alcohol consumption guidelines, which is the highest figure in Australia. These are among the many compelling reasons for the WA government to deliver on its election commitment to develop a men's health strategy and do more for men's health services. Today's launch follows an intensive phase of research, discussion and consultation with our many stakeholders, both in the metropolitan and the rural and regional communities of WA. I'd like to recognise all of you for your efforts, the individuals and organisations, all who have had input into this important process in developing this strategy.
Dean Dyer is a voluntary board member and past chair of the board for Men's Health and Wellbeing WA. He works as a consultant, advocate and educator in men's health and wellbeing here in Perth. This week he's been shortlisted for the award Significant Individual Contribution to Men's Health and Wellbeing in WA. Please make welcome board member Dean Dyer.
Hello everybody, welcome. Good to see so many faces here. I just want to start by offering a heartfelt thank you and fully acknowledge the Western Australian Government and the Health Minister Roger Cook for taking this initiative and developing the first ever men's health and wellbeing policy for WA. It's truly groundbreaking. And I'd also like to take the opportunity and reiterate what Russell said about the past volunteers, staff and board members of the Men's Health and Wellbeing Association over 20 years. Some of you are in the room today. Thank you so much for all your efforts, and I hope you are as pleased as I am to see this here today. This is what we're all excited about, and it's amazing to see it in the flesh. Hopefully some of you have got to see the real thing. There's not too many printed copies around. Hopefully you all got the summary at least and have one of those in your hot little hand. So the Minister for Health, Roger Cook, has pointed out some of the reasons this policy is so much needed in his video message. Probably preaching to the converted here, but here's a few more reasons just in case you didn't know. Significantly shorter life expectancy, far greater burden of disease, much less likely to use allied health services. The majority of the suicides are the leading cause of death for 15 to 44-year-old males. Males make up the majority of injuries in the A&E departments of hospitals, workplace fatalities, road trauma, homelessness, jail populations, children's behaviour problems and learning difficulties at school. This is on page 4 of the policy, and as you can see from some of those stats on the graphic, the top pile of graphics is for Western Australia and the bottom is a snapshot and correlated stats in Australia. That's the reason that myself and so many other men have been passionate. Seeing the statistics is one thing, being alongside somebody who's one of those statistics is another, and I know many of you in the room can relate to that. So men and boys continue to face poorer outcomes than women and girls on almost all measures of the key health and wellbeing indicators, including lower life expectancy and higher levels of mortality. So that's the reason, or certainly one of the reasons, the major reasons, behind the drive to get a policy like this in a state like WA. Now I'd just like to point out a couple of things about the policy. First of all, the vision. To optimise the health and wellbeing of all men and boys in Western Australia. That is a beautiful vision. The purpose of this policy: to provide direction to the WA health system and its partners to deliver strategies to improve the physical, mental, social and emotional wellbeing of men and boys living in WA. You'll see some guiding principles up there, and you'll also see a section on priority populations. The top 5 of which, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare report: Aboriginal men, men living in rural and remote areas, men in low socioeconomic circumstances, men from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and older men are the top 5 in that group. The priority populations recognises that some groups of males can be discriminated against or feel marginalised for various reasons. Some of that's outlined in the policy. So you'll see 3 goals. First goal, men are empowered to be proactive in managing their health and wellbeing. Some of the action areas under that first goal are things like develop the personal skills of men, empowering men, the media promoting positive messages of boys and men, and employing more male staff in health services and programs, and school programs designed specifically for young men and boys. The second goal, men have equitable access to services including prevention and early intervention initiatives that meet their needs. Some of the action areas that you'll find in the policy under the second goal are train and upskill health professionals and staff, address the she'll be right attitude, develop an action group that brings all stakeholders together to have further discussions about where to from here, and integrate this policy into local planning and workplaces. And goal number 3, men's health and wellbeing needs are monitored, evaluated and inform continual improvement of programs, services and initiatives. One of the action areas under that goal is that men are meaningfully involved in the design and the development of programs. In short, a paradigm shift. This is on the back page of your summary. So the policy also recognises the following domains as the levers for achieving those goals. And for the purpose of this policy, the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion domains have been used to address the need for a holistic and collaborative approach to the many and complicated issues that affect men's health and wellbeing. It is time all of these statistics began to move in a positive direction, I'm sure you'll agree. You probably wouldn't be here if you didn't agree with that. So many lives could be saved, so many men could live happier and healthier lives. The leadership shown by Roger Cook and the WA government in creating this policy contributes to a clear direction and framework in how we can all achieve that. I very much look forward to our conversations together today and at the next meetings in the future. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dean. And now to find out what you think. Our moderator today is Miles Protter. Miles mentors business and other organisational leaders in having fulfilling work that matters to them. He's also the founder of Men's Business, a not-for-profit equipping men to be mentors for other men in their workplaces and communities. Ladies and gentlemen, Miles Protter.
So this is really, really exciting for me. I've been involved in men's well-being for a long time. And, you know, one of the aspects of the policy, which I'm sure most of you haven't read because I think it only went out today, one of the aspects of the policy is that the government intends to bring together stakeholders from across community, government, non-government, and industry. And this is a fantastic first step right here, right? I mean, you can see this is exactly what we've got. So we're actually fulfilling the policy after just about 4 or 5 hours of the announcement. And the idea of getting people together is to have a conversation. And it's a conversation where men's health and well-being is kept front of mind in the community, where there's advocacy for action, supporting the policy, creating partnerships, collaboration, common goals, sharing data, sharing research, etc. And so we are being asked by the government to collaborate. And that's really what we want to do today. So I just want to, I'm going to call on a few people. Most of you know who you are. I may not get to all of you, but we're going to just call on a few people who represent different sectors of the community, of the different communities that are interested in men's health and well-being. And I'm going to just ask you guys to answer really just 2 questions. The first question is, from your seat where you sit, and not necessarily representing your organization, but just personally where you sit, what do you see? How is it? How is it going for men and boys, right? And maybe what's good and what's not so good. And then what's next? So I'm going to start with Kyle. Okay, so Kyle, begin. Kyle is now a politician, but you were very involved in FIFO and taking care of people in FIFO. So just want to hear from you, a couple of minutes. Kyle, it's great that you're here. What do you see on the ground, and what do you think we need to be doing together? Because we're all here together.
Thank you very much. My background mainly came from the FIFO industry in the space of the maritime sector, but I did live in Karratha around the iron ore industry, and I now live in Kalgoorlie, which is the gold industry. So I've seen quite a different facets of how the FIFO industry is operated, and quite frankly, some of it is quite disturbing. But it is definitely known to be a male-dominated industry right across all 3 of them sectors. Women are breaking in now, but it's a very male-dominated industry. So a lot of the issues you would think, after the many years they've been operating, we would finally be on a path to understanding them and being able to control them. In FIFO workers, we see 33% more likely to get mental health issues than the statistics we just seen there as well. So you put that in perspective. It's massive to think how many men are going to work under mental duress. The problem that I foresee at the moment is that the policy we're releasing now, as you said, is creating this space for us to collaborate. One of the biggest issues with corporations is the lack of trust or ability to collaborate. They seem to sit in silos and have their own policies and their own understandings and their own data, which I think actually works against the ability for us to actually find a fix. So each different company has their own method of delivering men's health, or some none at all. But if we were to get in the same space and actually start understanding it as a holistic issue that affects all industries and affects all men, I think we would find not only more funding in that space, but more understanding and a better way of delivering it. I will agree that that's not just in men's health, that's in a lot of things. It's definitely something that I think if they collaborated on more and were more willing to share the load and all go to the same course, I think we'd find a better outcome for men in that space.
Thank you, great. Great, thanks very much. You can give them a clap, Thank you. I was going to ask you, Joe. So it's Joe Burgess, and Joe's from the WELGA, Local Government Authority, and I just thought it would be, there's so much engagement you have on the ground, and it'd just be lovely to hear from you about what do you see around men's health and well-being, and what's missing and what's next.
Thanks for that. I think first and foremost, you utilise the terminology about speaking from our personal space as well. Yeah. So it probably assists in what drives me to be in the space I'm in. I'm the sister of a 25-year, probably closer to 30-year plus FIFO worker, and I've seen the journey and extraordinary challenges that he has gone through over the years. Many of the things that you'd all be very familiar with, he would have experienced most of those. So very conscious of the importance of collegiality, the importance of knowing where to go for help, the importance of acknowledging that help might be needed. Local government's an unusual place for us to be, for many in the room, I would imagine, to be going, well, what the hell do you have to do with any of this space? As I was reading through the summary, there was, in the priority populations, there was all but one that we have a focus on. And it's only because that particular area is the remit of specialists. And we do have touch points there because local government is a long way from roads, rates and rubbish as it once was. Certainly, local government can be not always the providers. They can be the facilitators, the conduits to join up some of these approaches that we're talking about. It's a huge piece of work local governments are currently undertaking to do with public health and local public health planning. And we have, in our consultation processes as the association with local governments, with their communities, have very much seen that some of the things that were missing from the very first interim state public health piece that local governments to work to was mental health across the board, not specifically for men and boys. Thank you. And also about health and wellbeing, because this isn't just about water quality and all of those things. It was seen that community, of which local government is seen to be at the core of that administrative arm, is so important to everything that we do. So as the conversation gets explored a bit further, there is so much that local government can do, but we all come to the place of work and the part of our community as individuals with huge experience. I think we're all either the brother, the sister, the son, the daughter, whatever, of people that have experienced many of the things that are listed in this, and I commend all that have been involved with the process so far.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Joe. It's really important to hear you speaking from the heart. You know, like as a sister. You know, that's as someone close to your family. I was going to ask Tony Monahan. Yeah. So Tony Monahan, who's from the Chamber of Minerals and Energy WA. And so in several steps removed, you represent a lot of big employers, right? And so just love to hear, just what do you see personally, I guess? What do you see on the ground? What's happening and what do you think's missing? What do we need to do?
Thanks very much. Following on from what Joe said, I think that there's probably nobody in this room who hasn't got a family, friend or a loved one who's been touched by mental health issues or depression or something along those lines. So I think that obviously it's something that affects all of us. Some of us have to deal with it, on a regular, sometimes maybe on a more regular basis than others. So it's good to see that these conversations are being had across the state, and they're starting at low levels, and stigma's being broken. But certainly at the Chamber of Minerals and Energy, we understand that our sector employs a lot of men who are in that high risk demographic. So that's men of working ages, and we realise that there is a lot to be done. And certainly we accept the findings of that Curtin report last year, the FIFO Mental Health, that found that 33% of workers experience high or very high levels of distress. And while there's lots of things being done within the sector, and I think the resources sector is, potentially leading the way. I can't think of many other industries. There's so much more that we can do as well. There's no doubt about that. So we have partnered with Lifeline last year to develop a program for FIFO workers. We're kind of at the phase one of that stage. We're looking to develop resources, products and activities designed for the workforce, their families and the on-site managers as well. We're at phase one. We're looking at the design. We're looking at what sort of programs we want to roll out and what are the best channels to deliver them. So we're really at the grassroots level looking at how we best put a program together and then how we implement it. So over the coming weeks, we'll be looking to land on a whole lot of recommendations and how we move those forward. But the end goal, and it was mentioned, yes, we do have a lot of very big members in the sector, so that, the big FMGs and BHPs, and they have the resources to provide services, whether it's confidential counselling or EAPs to their members, their FIFO workers. What we want, the end goal, is for our smaller resource members to have a program that they can roll out so that at least there's a minimum level of FIFO mental health care programs for all workers, no matter which site they're on across the state.
Thanks. Thank you. And I guess it's, you were, someone said, the business has got to maybe reach out from the proprietary, this is my program. We've got to start learning to reach out and share information. And we know how difficult that is.
Really good idea, but
Yeah.
To sort of say we should be sharing, because if we share resources, you get much greater value.
Just say that again.
Yes, I agree with, I think it was Kyle who raised the point that if we shared resources, we just get greater results on the ground, and that's something we're looking to do. As we said, we want to get these programs out to those of our members who can't afford those sorts of mental health programs for their employees. We want to make sure that there is a minimum level of care available, whether that's on-site counselling or EAPs or whatever it is, that's those sort of services available not just to the employees themselves, but to their family, their friends, and their on-site managers as well.
Great, thanks. Thank you, thanks. I'd like to ask, so Mick Buchan, you're with the CFMEU, and I'd just like to ask, how do you see things? How do you see things on the ground? What's missing? What do you think we need to do? How do we need to collaborate and work together?
No worries. Excuse me. I suppose, and I heard the word paradigm shift earlier, and there definitely has been a paradigm shift within our space, within the construction sector, where we've seen a dramatic shift towards baseline agreements and insecure work, which has a huge impact on traditionally the breadwinner of the family. And let me just give you an example of today. For example, we've had terrible weather in Perth over the weekend. What we've seen today on many projects is that men and women that have rocked up to work in the construction sector today, that work through labour hire agencies instead of directly employed with subcontractors or principal contractors, were sent home about 9 o'clock without any pay whatsoever. That's going to have a huge impact on their weekly take-home pay this week. It's going to have a huge impact on whether it be the school lunches, or whether it be some fuel for the car, or whether it be the sport on the weekend, but it will definitely have an impact. Now, the shift that's come out of that is where we, since I suppose the bust in the resource boom, we've seen a dramatic shift, whether it be from the resource sector or the commercial construction sector, or even around government procurement. The shift from engaging with good industry agreements that set out industry standards and move to the cheapest bid wins a job. Now, I suppose the ongoing impacts of that is that we see insecure work. We see slips in safety standards and workers being put at risk. We've got evidence where wives ring up our union office at different times during the day, but at least a few calls a week saying that they've got concerns about their husband at work. Their husband doesn't want to speak up about it because he's employed casually on a day-to-day basis. And what do? Because he doesn't feel safe working on that roof. Well, they've asked him to work off an edge of a building without any fall protection. That's a reality, and that's what we're facing with, what my members and construction workers in general are faced with every day of the week. And it's not just the blue-collar union guys out there. It's the site engineers, it's the surveyors that used to make sure that there were scaffolds put up if they had to put a point on the end of a building. Now they're sort of asked to put a harness on or get there and do what they can. It's across our whole industry, and I think that's adding to the impacts on mental health and the health and well-being of men and boys, apprenticeships. The apprentices out there these days have really got it tough in what they do. We do what we can to get mentors out there or sort of point out guys on different jobs and point them out that they can go to if they feel pressure and so on. But I suppose that's sort of contribution from myself today.
Thank you. Thanks. So, look, you can hear some really different perspectives here, right? And we're going to have to somehow learn to work together to make something happen. So I was going to ask, going to sort of shift sector. So Paul Flatow, you're with the Center for Social Impact at UWA, and I don't know you, but I know of you, and you sort of you're really interested in how do we measure social impact? How do we actually know we're making a difference? Just be interested to hear your perspective on all this. Well-being for men and boys. What's it look like to you? What do we need to do?
Thanks for that. I've been involved in research in this area for a long time, and just picking up on a couple of themes that we've just heard. Something like 20 odd years ago, we did this first study on mental health and unemployment, and the relationship between unemployment and also impending job loss and mental health effects and wellbeing effects is particularly strong. And that then goes into a whole range of other areas. So whilst we aren't there looking at the causes of, say, cancer, we can see these direct links between the social and the health side. And those links are incredibly important. The reference just then to low income and food insecurity. You know, what happens in WA? We've just released a report, the 100 Families report with WACOS and other community service organisations looking at the level of food insecurity and hunger in Western Australia. What does low income, including those who are on low pay, do in terms of the health and well-being of people in their households? So this is a really significant area. The social and the health are very, very strongly related.
Thank you, Paul. Very interesting. So Craig McAllister, you're with the Primary Health Association, so it represents a lot of GPs and people at the front line of the medical, I guess, the medical side of things. When men, I hear, don't like to turn up to the doctor very often, a lot of men don't. So what do you see on the ground, like with men's health and well-being? What's so right now, and what's missing? What do we need to be doing together to move things forward?
Thanks, Miles. I guess it's across the lifespan that we need to look at this as well. Enthused that boys, men, older males were included in the policy, which is really good. I think the GP or Medicare, it's a universal thing. Everyone can access it, but the problem becomes, how easy it is to get there. Do you actually want to go to the GP? Do you actually want to have that conversation with your pharmacist? So the work that the WA Primary Health Alliance is doing, and we're a funder on behalf of the federal government, so we fund primary health initiatives and work with GPs, is really about training and conversations with clinicians about if a bloke is in your surgery getting a flu shot or having his motor vehicle license renewal or whatever it is, capture that opportunity. And what other conversations can you have about health and well-being at the same point? 80% of us do go to a GP once a year. So there is at least once a year. So there is an opportunity there. Same with the pharmacists, picking up some Panadol for your kid or all those other opportunities with Allied Health. I think that's the space that is really interesting. Keep it short.
Are there, from a statistical point of view, is there anything you see like that kind of, just personally, that kind of bothers you or worries you or thinks that's really urgent? Is there anything you see in particular right now?
Yeah, if we take youth mental health, for example, so Headspace as the national flagship program, only about 38% of participants are males. And so if this is the flagship program the government, we are all promoting and getting behind, young boys just aren't accessing the service. And so we need to change the conversation, change the way it works, change the type of therapy and treatment even. We need to be open to all those sorts of things. We have the opportunity to be world leaders in this in Perth. We have an amazing multidisciplinary health system that says, listen, there should be no wrong doors in this area, but we've made so many wrong doors. I think one of the challenges for us, challenges for the whole sector, is to say, listen, if there's a spot or a place that a young bloke, a middle-aged bloke, whoever it is, gets to, how do we ensure we can wrap some good care around them at the same time?
Thank you. Thanks. I was going to ask Mark Booth. Mark's with the Mental Health Commission. So Mark, it's probably quite a similar conversation, but you see it from a different angle. What do you see the big challenges are, and what's missing, and what do we need to focus on? And again, think about the collaboration, the potential for collaboration. Thanks.
I'm going to actually add to this because I'm actually on secondment to the Commission, but I actually work with Wangan Cardup, Specialist Aboriginal Mental Health Service. So I've had that experience front line of working with a very marginalised group for the last 8 years. I've worked in prisons as well, back in the UK and here. But from the perspective we're now at with the launch today of this particular policy, it aligns really well to the aims and objectives of the Commission itself. It focuses on men in specificity, but that overall objective is access. How do we get them access to a point of need? I think it's one of the most fundamental questions. Like you say, we don't like asking that question of going anywhere. We don't ask for directions as men. So we need to map out, quite appropriately with the policy, where those avenues exist and where we can best make use of them. Again, going into prisons, there's work being done there within the Commission. There's been work done within FIFO and construction. But equally, I think as a learning objective is looking at the policy now. We got it released today. I'll take that back to the Commission and look at where there's other synergies to be had. Because that's the bit. The collaboration is there. I think we just need to make the most of it and align it again. We're all very good at coming out with our strategy documents. The Commission has theirs, which is a 10-year plan. We've now got the current update, which is released last month. So again, we want to make use of those alignments and opportunities to learn.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I hear. So we're talking about a lot of people. We're talking, FIFO. We're talking about just men in general, boys not accessing mental health. I mean, I come into contact with a lot of boys and young men, and I know some of them are doing it tough. And the thought of going to see someone is an absolutely shameful thing. They would never do it. So yeah, we got some work to do. And I love what you say about collaboration. We've got our 10-year plan, but does it match up with this 10-year plan and this 10-year plan? It's really interesting, isn't it? So you've been putting your hand up, sir. It's Andrew Markov from.
Andrew Mark. That's a training agency. I just want to add a couple of descriptors to myself. I've actually changed my name back to my birth name of Andrus Markovs. But like my colleague here at UWA, I sit on their advisory board at the School of Population and Global Health. I also have a less admirable title, and it's a fairly wanky one. It's Principal Master Trainer in Mental Health First Aid, and that's been for the last decade. There's a bit of an elephant in the room, isn't there, Miles? Mental health. I think every speaker so far has basically directed most of their comments at mental health. When I look through the summary, and I'm not being critical here because I haven't had the opportunity to read the whole document, there is not a single mention of mental health as a standalone important item. And I think that is something that is obvious from the speakers that have already spoken here. If I can take it further, there's one other thing that hasn't been mentioned in this document or amongst any of the speakers today, and that is the P word, prevention. In our state of Western Australia and in our nation of Australia, health is by far the biggest budget spend. Mental health is generally about 10% of the budget spends, both nationally and state-wise. So if 10% of our Western Australian budget is spent on Western Australian health budget, which is huge, is spent on mental health, only 10% of that is then spent on prevention. Now, I'm no good at maths. I'm old and I lived in the country for many, many years. Albany, actually, paradise. But even I can see if it's only 10% of 10%, there's bugger all being spent on preventative mental health. And if I'm getting one consistent idea coming from this summary, it is that prevention in men and boys' health is the way to go, rather than treatment after the fact.
Thank you. That's great. I think the other thing to say is, the government policy is going to do what the government policy is going to do, right? So we're a lot of us are here to say, well, what can we do? And thank you for that, okay? I'm just going to call on a couple of other people here in the front. So Ray Wills, you're Future Smart Strategies. And so you're kind of a futurist. I've heard some people say some great things about you. What do you see is like the way forward here? What do you see as some of the things that are missing in the way forward that could help, especially in the collaborative side of things?
Yeah, thanks for that. One of the arts of a futurist is, first of all, you need to know what the past told you before we can work out where the future's taking us. If we look at world global problems, we've got breakdowns at all levels. We've got breakdowns, planetary breakdowns in terms of climate change, biodiversity, pollution. There's a whole range of things that then bring us back down to the nation, down to the family. We've seen breakups of family on country, whether it's Indigenous Australians and knowledge of Whadjuk Noongar people and the challenges there. But Sean reminded us that we need to get back in contact with country. And contact with country is also contact with family. For Indigenous people, we've deconstructed them. We've had stolen generations and a whole range of things that have put pressure on families, both women and girls and men and boys. We've got to actually get better at connecting people. And I'll move on to the future in just a second by taking this passage of a lot of the language we continue to use, and language is critical. The language you use is the language of our tribe. Whether we're engineers or doctors or psychiatrists, it's the language of our tribe. We've got to get better at actually joining that language together, having a single voice and a single idea on how to actually best progress this. I'm very optimistic about the future on a whole range of things, and technology, I think, will be important in terms of where we go, because this century is very much about distributed technologies. Whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a solar panel on your rooftop, or whether it's an Uber ride device, each of those things is bringing distributed thinking. But it's actually also, at the same time, through social media and other elements, joining us together. And there's a lot of opportunity in this coming technology to actually think about these issues that we need to challenge, the separation, the distance from country, the distance from family, and actually use that technology to bring us back together. And that's a unique opportunity where I am optimistic that a number of these issues, and mental health is key to that, but there's a lot of opportunity in technology. Technology is not going to fix everything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if we make the most of it, then it will help us. And so I'm optimistic about the future, about where that technology can take us. And artificial intelligence, wearable devices, a whole range of monitoring devices that can start to understand better not only human physiology but human psyche, will actually start to contribute the data that we need to interpret what the problems are and look for the solutions that are in them. So I'm very optimistic from that point of view. I can go on for hours. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and possibly even, one of the other ideas or action areas that have come out of the policy that I had a quick look at was ideas of portals where people could go and get sort of joined up thinking and joined up advice. So again, that's all in the technology space. So thanks. I'd like to ask Wayne Bradshaw. So Wayne's he's CEO of the Fathering Project, which some of you might have heard of. And I just think it's good to hear from Wayne because he was very involved in sport and waffle before this job, and now you're really it's a really kind of ground up, community-based, not-for-profit, grinding it out, getting dads to engage with their kids at schools. So it's like, I just wanted to kind of let you speak for that kind of sector, and what do you see the issues are, and what do you see the kind of actions we need to be taking?
Thanks, Miles. I guess I'll just begin by saying that we're in a fortunate position where sort of we're getting a bit of profile now, and it largely arose because we're a bit lucky in terms of us getting some federal funding to roll out our program. And I think one of the shifts that I detect at government, certainly when we were talking in Canberra, but also in the corporate sense, is a bit of an understanding about the need to address men's issues, to kind of move things across. Like when talking to major corporations, they're saying, well, we've done lots around general health and women's needs, which is greatly needed, but we need to shift that back a bit and give some more support to men. So I think there is an opportunity there to actually shift things back to men, because I'd suggest that one of the other 10%ers would be that 10% of funds are also applied, that's just a guess anyway, to specific men's activities. So it's good to see that that's the case. From our perspective at a community level, we see that men kind of have lost the village, the community, and the programs that we're trying to do is really just get men together so they can create some mateship, have some fun, and build that sense of community. And we're basically a kids' charity, but we're also noticing that in putting our program forward, one of the big outcomes that the schools want is actually to build that community. And the secondary element too is that mental health issue, is that if we can get men together and increase connectedness, then there's an opportunity in that space. So I think there's an opportunity there. I reckon one of the things about the policy, it's all well and good to have a policy, but I reckon the next step, it's a big, and congratulations to the guys to get the policy done, but I think the next step is to actually find out what the action is going to be and who's going to drive it and who's going to lead it. Policy is like a bit, I'd hate to think that they're just like strategic plans for many organisations. You do one or a vision statement and they just sit on the side. I'd like to hope that the group, you guys can actually lead and bring everyone together so there are action plans for everyone to actually make an impact with men, to build that village up, to address some of the issues, and in particular to actually look at the prevention side of things and get an understanding that prevention is the way to go, and to get a collective sort of bipartisan approach, if you like, to have a longer term view on how you can address the community issues rather than from an election to election cycle.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So Jen Gray, you're with WACOS, yes? And so just really like to hear, you're on the front line of social services, or you are and your people are. I mean, tell us what you see. What are the issues that need to be addressed? And what's missing? How do we work together with all these amazing people and organizations in this room to make something happen?
Thanks, Miles, and thanks also, Sean. So WACOS is the peak body for the community service sector, and one of the things that we see is the way that men and women access community services still reflects very much gendered stereotypes around the way that we do this. So we see that, I think it's been pointed out by quite a few speakers here, that women are much better at help seeking than men, and we see that they access the allied health services, including Headspace, at a far greater rate than men. Things are changing a bit, and we have seen some, improvements in the way that men engage with some services, some community services, and particularly the drop-in services, where maybe I'm hypothesising here that there's less stigma or shame attached with accessing those services. The policy framework is a really great step, I think, towards progressing further change. But just to follow on with what Wayne was saying, we really need to see, what does this policy look like on the ground? What does it look like, when the rubber hits the road? And really, really importantly, the way that services need to be designed is with the input and involvement of the services that they are being delivered for, the particular cohorts and target populations that have been identified. So these services need to be co-designed, and alongside other strategies like promoting, proactive engagement with health services, which again is happening to a certain extent.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks. So is Stephen Baxter? Stephen, do you mind if we call on you? So Stephen's Deputy Director of Public Schools. You're engaging with our kids, and we'd love to hear what you see the issues are, and how we could be collaborating to work together to improve the health and well-being of boys, especially.
Yeah, 310,000 kids go to our public schools each day. There's almost 500,000 when the independent and Catholic sector are built into it. The speaker from the CFMEU, his comments really resonated. The kids who come into our classrooms every day, they give us a really clear view into the communities where they live, the houses where they live. My view is that until such time that children live in homes where there is security of housing, where there is security around the living costs, the fact that they won't feel embarrassed to go to school because they don't have their lunch. And there's a lot of great work that goes on around that with breakfast clubs and things. But if I think of the Premier's Our Priorities document that said sharing prosperity, not only in this state, across Australia, if we get that vision for the future, that's the vision, one of the speakers said something about the future we're heading towards. If we just believe that we're heading towards a future, not creating a future, then we'll probably end up with a probable future. Those children who are coming into our schools who see the pressures, the stress at home, it'll perpetuate. It's the classic computer do loop. So that's my hope for the future, that we get some visionary thinking at a federal level and at a state level, so that the policies that are set at those levels start to address that notion of sharing prosperity, prosperity being health and well-being as much as anything else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got time for probably just two more people to say something. So is there anyone who's, this gentleman back there?
Nala Kardic. I think Mark Anderson from Foundation for Indigenous Sustainable Health. I think a couple of things that we've not talked about is the Gurrias and Wadjulas see health in everything as separate: physical health, mental health, environmental health, etc. But I think what we don't understand is that everything's interconnected. If the earth's sick, we're sick. If our mental health's sick, we get physically sick. If we're physically sick, we get emotionally sick. And if you just look at what's happening in the Murray in the eastern states with the river dying and things like that, and the mental health of people along that river, that's something that Aboriginal people have known for generations, and something that we've kind of disconnected ourselves with. The other thing that I think is significant is hope. You know, we're talking about preventativeness. And we deal with kids out on country, we deal with kids in remote communities, if you go down into the Binjarab region, which is the Peel region, we call it the Binjarab region, you know, we've had suicides of young men, young fellas, and we were just talking to some people the other day who have lost their mate. And this real sense of no hope for the future. Well, where does that come from? Jump to the newspaper and what do you read every single day? Trauma, death, things like that. And I think one of the strategies is around, we've got to create a sense of hope in our community. If all we're saying in our newspapers and in our news and things like that is no hope, then how are we going to expect our kids to have good, strong mental health? We've got to give people a sense of hope. Parents, adults, children, everyone a sense of hope. This pessimistic view of the future, which we perpetuate in our media, that has to change. The other thing is the disconnection. We disconnect from each other. Technology is fantastic. I love technology. I think it's brilliant. But our technology is separating us from people. We've got kids who have got 700 friends, all on Facebook. But how many real friends do they actually have that they can sit down and have a wongi with, have a yarn with? So I think connection to people is really important, and we're losing that art with technology. And I watch parents now. The kids are the one who are talking now at the coffee table, and the parents are the ones who are on their Facebook page. I think the other thing is connection to country. Right this morning, I did a debrief, last night with one of our volunteers from Melbourne who's come off country with the kids. And she said one of the Fitzroy boys who was in town, if you know the suicide rate in Fitzroy of young fellas in town, goes out on community and actually gets reconnected to country and is actually building an earth house out on community. And you know, she said it was very poignant. This young bloke said to her, when I get picked up on a Tuesday morning and I go out on country and I'm doing something, he said, I feel myself. And yet we're separating ourselves from country. And if you want people to connect to country, Aboriginal people know this for years. If you want to heal who you are, Go on country. Get connected to country. Hope, getting connected to country and reconnecting to each other.
Thank you. Thank you. There's one, okay, it was lady down there. Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Monica Nagel. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I have been listening really with great interest to all the presentations. However, one issue which I found missing is, I believe to tackle the health problem, I think very much that we have to look much more into the sources. Where are the problems coming from? Because a health problem has so many different reasons to create a problem for the individual. And I think we have to put it into different areas and find out where our problems in our societies have multiplied so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got one more here, and then there was a gentleman up there who wanted to say something. So John Paulson, principal with People, Passion, and Performance, and you're formerly head of a big law firm. So John wanted to say something. So what do you see is the issue on the ground, and what should we be doing?
So for me, my background is as running large professional services firms. And I suppose one of the things I learned was, particularly for men, success and achievement in those sorts of industries is very, very strong driver. And any sign of failure, in particular the elephant in the room we've been talking about, mental health issues, is something to be buried and hidden. I suffered my own journey with mental health issues and decided over a decade ago that I'd talk about it. And since then in the legal profession there's been a lot talked about, not a lot yet done. But for me, I think creating the environment where you can still be successful but also admit that you're not strong always in mental health is key. I now work with leaders and emerging leaders, and it's really around values and culture. And something that Sean Nanup said at the beginning really resonated with me. When people find their true and deep purpose and live in alignment with their values, and if they are leaders and they do the same in their organisations, you can actually build mentally healthy workplaces.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, last one. Sir, yeah. Just your name and who you represent, if you represent any organisation.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Peter Connaughton and I'm a doctor in South Perth. I'm the past president of the Australian Faculty of Occupational Environmental Medicine. So we have about 400 consultant doctors throughout Australia and New Zealand who consult to all sorts of industries and organisations. I'd like firstly to congratulate the board on, and also the government on, launching this policy. I think it's tremendous and great work. Congratulations. I just wanted to draw your attention to, there's a document which you can find easily on the internet called The Health Benefits of Good Work. Men are very connected in terms of purpose and their sense of well-being to their employment. The policy, The Health Benefits of Good Work, is aimed as to stimulate leaders in organisations throughout Australia to work hard to create better work and healthier work, which in fact improves the mental health and well-being of workers. So it really puts out a positive challenge to employers and all sorts of organisations through a community to take an optimistic and collaborative view for the future. And there are now over 300 organisations throughout Australia and New Zealand that have signed up with the commitment to improving work conditions, both the mental health and the well-being for both the men and women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, I'd like to finish by just saying thank you to the people we asked, some at extremely short notice, some at no notice at all, to say something. I just hear this burning need to get together and talk some more. We have people in this room who don't normally necessarily get together and talk and collaborate, and I think the opportunity is massive to do that. So how we do that, that's yet to be determined, but I'm going to leave that to my colleague, Dennis, also known as Jack, who's the chairman of Men's Health and Wellbeing WA. And here's a mic for you.
Thank you, Miles. Well, I don't envy myself the task of trying to bring that to any kind of useful conclusion. But I would first of all like to thank Miles for holding that space for us and directing traffic, because I think it was a rich and really useful start in the little time that we have. So thank you, Miles. All right, I made a million notes. Mainly what I want to do is keep hearing more from the people who've already spoken, and there's a lot of firepower sitting in this room. I really wish we had time to do it now. That time will come. There's a lot of diversity here and a lot of experience sitting in this room. So if I was to draw out the key things that I've heard sitting there as a member of the audience, I've heard that if we men and boys, if we as people are weller, then our health outcomes will be better. I've heard that repeated. I've heard that mental health is a major component of that. That's kind of saying the same thing. I have heard that the sharing resources is critical going forward. I think the biggest thing I've heard as a theme is this thing about a paradigm shift. It keeps coming, and I keep seeing plenty of coal faces and definitions of areas where work needs to be done, some of it critical, urgent, but I also see plenty of signs pointing to solutions and ways forward that are looking productive and helpful for us in those spaces. So what's there for me, and I've heard it reflected a couple of times here today, is that we're coming out of an old paradigm. We're some way in that transition. If you read philosophy, you would have some awareness of this. We come from a background of partisan thinking, silos, and if I don't get what you're on about, then I go exterminate. That's just. There's a tendency to come from that place, and somehow evolution has that has served us well. What's there for me, and what I think the literature suggests, is that the paradigm is shifting to something else. And what I've heard in this room today is we need to collaborate. We need to work together, even if there are ideological differences. That is the thing that will make the difference. So my question for you is, given all the different backgrounds and places that you in this room come from, are we ready? Are we ready to work together? Yes. Can I see a show of hands? You're not representing anybody here except yourself. Do you get that it really needs to happen? Yeah. So one of the questions that I saw come up was, who's going to lead it? Well, I don't know. There's leadership going on all over the place in this space, and I acknowledge it. Our organisation is here ready to continue to foster these conversations and continue to try and bring people together to have these critical conversations fleshed out. Hopefully this policy will flow into strategies that have another theme, a single voice, single visionary voice. Can we get on the same page enough to go, yep, that really needs to happen? And here's a way for it to happen. Without that, from all the sectors, we'll be stuck. So are we ready for that? Okay, we'll get to work on it and try and make that space happen as much as we can. That's our undertaking to you from this place. I think that's it. Thank you for being here, you guys.
Just jump in. Let's give us another go. 3, 2, 1, hands up. Woo!